All right. So Neil and I were brought together through Sarah. We haven't actually known each other for very long, just a couple of months now, and she brought us together intuitively because she knew we would connect. And we're going to be talking about from limited to limitless potential. Maybe we could, before going into the thing, we could tell them what we do without telling them what we do.
Wow. Well, first of all, I think I will take a step back in time, because exactly 10 years ago, more or less to the day, I was an IT guy. So I was caught in all those dreadful IT meetings with various stakeholders from around the business, someone from marketing, someone from HR, someone from finance. As soon as the tech guy opened his mouth, everyone's eyes rolled back in their head and start thinking about what they want to eat and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking on LinkedIn, and they just started releasing a blog feature where you can put your publication out there. And that was just 10 years ago today. And that man there, Mr. John White, was a complete rock star. He had over 1 million article views on one article, wasn't he, John? Was it 1 million?
Yeah.
And I reached out to John, and he wasn't, look at me, I'm the rock star with 1 million views. He helped me get started on the platform. And from there, I got started with Sarah. She helped support me. I helped support her. Then there's Anna, Thomas. We all created this community. And then from that moment, I ended up leaving the IT world behind to focus on my writing. And if I look back, it was all down to a few people in this room really that helped support me. So as I've gone from the IT guy to now someone that's a tech journalist and a podcaster in a career that I never ever saw coming, I want to try and get people here today thinking about how they can look beyond what they're doing at the moment, how they can unlock whatever their passion might be.
Is it 300 or 3,000 podcasts that you've done? I know it was a big number.
Well, I made a bit of a mistake on my. It's actually 2,800.
Okay.
2,800 interviews, but I have done 200 interviews with Citrix, so you could say 3,000 interviews.
Oh, yeah.
But if I look back, there's a saying that you guys have got over in the US, which I absolutely love. The riches are in the niches. But in the UK, that's called niches. So riches in the niches.
I always think
So when I left the IT world behind, I pigeonholed myself into tech blog writer guy. That was my niche. That's what I wanted to hone in on. And in the last 10 years, I've gone beyond that. I've got lots of different revenue streams that I'll talk about in a minute. But pretty much that is what we're going to cover today, is how to think beyond what you're actually doing. And whatever your passion is, unlock something, and you could be doing something very different. And maybe you're in the corporate space at the moment, thinking of doing something else. Maybe you're just starting out as an entrepreneur. Maybe you're building a sidekick. Whatever it is, I hope it's going to be something for everyone in this.
Yeah, and I think the most important part is to not need it to fit together in a logical way, whatever it is that you do want to do. I think Neil and I both have very non-traditional paths, which we'll talk about a little bit more together. My path is similar to Neil's in that I just never felt from a young age that I fit anywhere in the world. The traditional world just didn't feel good to me, and so I always felt that I was broken. I always felt that there was something wrong with me, and so I just started to follow that intuitive nudge inside that was leading me to what made sense to me, what felt good to me in my life, and it became really the perfect formula for my fulfillment and happiness and success. And Neil and I are going to go into that a little bit deeper now. But essentially today, we are going to bring you guys hopefully from a limited thinking into a more limitless thinking. And Neil, you want to walk me through what we're going to.
Yeah, sure. But just before we do, I'd love to, Sarah, I'd love for you to share. There's a stat you used on your podcast recently about people feeling that they don't fit in.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I've done hundreds of interviews and hundreds of thousands of people that I've worked with StrengthsFinder. And only one in all of that time has said, yeah, I really fit in. And that one person said, and I tried desperately to get out. Every other person that has mentioned anything has said, I never really fit in. Everyone. So what does that leave us with? The difference in Hannah's workshop with Luke and Sarah Lewitt in 2022. That session was all about the difference, the distinction between fitting in and belonging. Mm-hmm. It's a big, big distinction. So, no, really that what you're asking?
Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
I think we all put these self-imposed ceilings on what we can achieve, what we think we're good at, what will people think if I put this out there. We all have these feelings, regardless of when we all check each other's LinkedIn profiles and social profiles, and hey, look at us living our best lives. Deep down, we all have these concerns and these fears. So today, I think it's all about, as we've got on here, develop the courage to take imperfect action. Version 1 is better than version 0. So getting out there. There are so many tech tools now that can help you work smarter, not harder. We'll talk through some of those things as well, because you don't have to do it all. Because I know a lot of people here will say, well, I haven't got time to do this. How have you got time? Technology can make that so much easier. And I'm all about simplifying and demystifying technology. And also, again, I started out just being the tech blog writer guy. I've expanded what I offer to my clients. So how you can get different revenue streams, and you don't have to be a writer, podcast, or anything. Whatever it is you're doing, there will be other areas you can expand on. And then also, it could be tough, so building that resilience. We've seen a global pandemic, we've seen economic downturn. How can you adapt and be ahead of the curve? And also leverage your creativity to work in your zone of genius. Every single person in this room has got different strengths. You are all unique. I think we all get beaten down with what you think you should be doing, but I look to try and hone in on your area of genius.
So we are going to kick this off by inspiring you with a story, since this is all about storytelling. So this is my brother Tyler. He was actually supposed to be here with us, but the many connections made it a little bit challenging because he's in a wheelchair. So Tyler has cerebral palsy, and a lot of people would see him as limited, right? And so I think one of the really important distinctions today is, obviously we are living in physical human form. There are some physical limitations sometimes, right? Tyler is, in some sense, limited by his body, by his condition. I remember when I was a little girl, I used to dream of flying. I would literally have dreams of me like flying in the sky, and I still have them today, sometimes, every once in a while.
Do you flap your arms and fly, or do it like Superman?
Swimming.
I've done both. I've done that too.
Yeah, it's like swimming in the air. So clearly, like, obviously I can't go wings and start flying right now. It is a physical limitation. But what Neil and I want to talk about today more is the limitation that we create in our minds about what we think is possible for ourselves. And Tyler has been incredibly inspirational for this, because most people with cerebral palsy just live in a wheelchair and don't really do much in their lives. Tyler skis, Tyler hunts, Tyler fishes. He has done the Spartan race several times, something that I don't even think I could physically do. And so we just developed this merch line together around my book, and like following your gut, trusting your gut, and surpassing your limitations. And when we were thinking about some quotes for the merch, he was like, "Oh, I thought of a really good one before going to bed last night." He says, "I have CP, but CP doesn't have me." And I thought it was such a nice quote that really kind of showed how whatever limitations might be in our lives does not have to define what we can do in our lives. So we're going to show you a video of Tyler doing the Spartan race. This is many years ago. He's pretty awesome. I'm looking backwards here, so my mouse. Like going, because I'm looking at the screen and it's not.
Hi, my name is Andy Humphreys. I did the Spartan race this year with Tyler Young at Edelweiss, and possibly one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I met him through the disabled ski program at Mont Tremblant. Me and a friend of mine, Dan Arthurton, would take Tyler out for weeks at a time on the sit skis and the tandem skis in Tremblant. We met him a few years ago as a young ski guy that had to sit and watch other people have fun from the bottom of the mountain due to his disability. didn't realise that the facility was available for him to go up on the mountain and have fun like everyone else. So in typical Tyler Young fashion, he got involved with us at the disabled section of the ski school, and we've never looked back since. He comes every year, he has an amazing time. We can never do anything with him that isn't scary enough or fast enough. And I think when you see this video, you'll understand. The race day for me was something that it was quite last minute. Tyler's always willing to do something different and always try something different. I mentioned to him a couple of days before we did the April race run that he should maybe come and do it. He had his doubts, he was wondering whether he could do it. So we brought him along, and it was slow. It was slow going. I mean, it took us probably 6.5 hours to complete the course. There were some hills that he just physically couldn't make it up, so I would have to carry him, which obviously finished me off quite early. But that just the way he inspires people to push for that extra little bit of adrenaline or that level of effort is just astounding, and he brought that out for a lot of people. So it was a tough, like I said at the beginning, it was possibly the toughest thing I personally had to do. And it probably doesn't even come close to what he's had to deal with. So, very proud of him.
So, hard not to cry when you watch that video.
Going to be a tough act to follow, right?
So I Anybody else?
And I think our biggest regret for both of us is he was supposed to be here today, but he couldn't make it.
I don't think there's an elevator here. It would be difficult getting up.
No, there is.
Oh, there is? Okay.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So the key message here is
Yeah, I mean,
to take a leaf from Tyler's book there.
yeah, exactly. I think, it really shows how much limitations are in our heads, are in our conditioning also. Tyler could have landed in another family and just spent the rest of his life sitting at the bottom of the hill watching everybody else. My dad being ironically a very traditional farmer, hunter, fisherman, would not let him miss out on life. And so they've always really pushed him to do whatever he wants to do. He drives the tractors, he blows the snow at home, he cuts the grass, he does all of that stuff. And do not get in his way because he will get pissed off. So I hope that this will inspire you to really challenge your limitations today, the limitations you think you have, because really you can do anything you want with your life. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, with a little bit less emotion. Or not. So Neil and I are going to talk a little bit about how each of our stories and journeys is just very unique to us. And so Neil, I will let you go into yours first, and then I will get into my story.
So when I made the move of leaving the corporate world behind, I was absolutely terrified. I remember it so well even now. Taking that leap into the unknown and being completely self-sufficient, scary as hell. But when I did, I followed that rule. Riches are in the niches. And here in 2015, that was my income. It was entirely 50% writing it in my own name and 50%, or thereabouts, 40% ghostwriting for other people. So I'm getting a lot of CEOs, thought leaders saying, I've got all these ideas in my head, I just haven't got time to put it down on paper. Can you do it for me if we have a conversation? So I would do that. But then things change. A few years later, global pandemic comes along, people's budgets shrink, Audience behaviour changes. People now don't want long form content. They haven't got time to read it. They want little short form videos. Where does that leave a long form tech writer? And also the dreaded arrival of ChatGPT, which I personally think is a great tool and not a threat. But that's a conversation for another day. But so I needed to be more resilient, and I needed to protect my business and have not all my eggs in the one writing basket, but try and branch out into other areas. And it occurred to me that 10 years ago today, that was what I was earning. But then 2023, my income breakdown now is actually only about 40% growing. Everything else is around podcast production, where I not only have my own daily podcast, I help other businesses and individuals launch their own podcast. Live events, the podcast has paved the way for me to do moderating gigs at a live event. So it's more 7 to Las Vegas, to be a chair of 5 people, and I'll moderate the discussion. Pretty much it's exactly the same as my podcast, but in a live environment. Then podcast sponsor, I've recently got a podcast sponsor for the last 6 months as well, which brings in more revenue. Also, video content. I get a lot of people saying, can you turn my podcast or my content into short bite-sized videos? Again, they just haven't got time to do it, so that's something I do. And then, of course, the dreaded affiliate incomes. All the tools that I use, I can do blog posts around those tools, and anybody that links or buys from that particular link, I get a slight kickback from. But then you put all that into one big pot, and suddenly I'm much more resilient, because, hey, if I lose a writing client, I've got other things to fall back on. If I lose a podcasting client, I've got things to fall back on. So it's just protected me moving forward, especially in an age where, as a writer, ChatGPT and all the other stuff. So I know a lot of you here will be thinking, yeah, all this is great now, but I haven't got time to do all that stuff. So I've created a little graphic here, and I know you're a big pie chart guy here to a conversation, but a 30-minute Zoom call, which we've all got time for, if you structure that call well enough, that 30-minute Zoom call can be a podcast episode that you can send on all podcasting platforms. It can be a YouTube video on your YouTube channel. It can also create multiple snackable pieces of content on all those different platforms, and ultimately it presents you as more visible in your industry. And all from that 30-minute Zoom call. And I can have a one-to-one with any of you here on how to do that in minutes, not hours, not days. There are so many tools out there that will allow you to do that. There's a great one called Descript, for example, where I can upload a video, and that video is just like a Word document. So you don't need to be technical. All you do is you highlight that text from that video. So you have a 30-minute video, highlight the text, hit export. There's your 1-minute video that you can put on Instagram or TikTok or anything. So that's kind of my journey. This is just what I do, but of course not everybody in here wants to take this route. So I wanted you, Jen, to show a little about what you do as well.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you guys to maybe even just draw out a little pie chart for yourselves and put in there all the things that you'd like to do. And again, we're going to talk about the brain in a second, but getting away from does this logically have to make sense together? And my follow-up question, Neil, is you're more resilient, you have, in a sense, more revenue, I think, by doing this, but do you feel more fulfilled also by having more of this variety in your work than before?
Well, there's also the dreaded imposter syndrome. I also think I say yes far too much to things. I always think that one day someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and drag me back to that corporate.
There's a great podcast episode about that.
Magic in the Room episode number.
And a TED Talk by Melissa Hughes.
Yeah.
So my journey is very similar to Neil's, just doing things different. So when I allowed myself and gave myself permission to just not let any limitations get in the way of what I wanted to do and not worry about, does this fit or make sense? I actually ended up starting to live a life of duality, which I realized that I really love. I love duality. I love contrast. And so now, when I'm talking to somebody, I'm really honest about who I am. So I talk tech, which is what got us connected, where I'm a total tech nerd. I've been in tech for the last 13 years, and I do intuitive readings. I'm a yoga teacher, and I love to drink tequila. I teach meditation and business leadership. I love teaching about the brain and creativity. I lead my life and business with the moon and with an amazing system called Asana, which is a project management system. So sometimes I'm living in the middle of the country in Canada where it's freezing cold, and other moments I'm living in vibrant Mexico, depending on how I'm feeling intuitively. So my intuition has led me to nothing that makes logical sense to the outside world, or that normally fits together, for society to understand, but it always fits perfectly for me. And that has been my whole journey. So what I teach people now is how to really trust their intuition and follow that path, even if it doesn't make sense. Because for me, it has always brought me to the highest level of fulfillment, of success, of joy, and I'm in my flow, right? So my podcast is called Finding Your Flow, and this is what allows me to be in my flow. And I really believe that when we're all in our flow and we unlock or get rid of all of the things that are causing limitations potentially, that is when we can really live at the highest potential or highest expression of ourselves and of our lives. So these are two stories that we're sharing today to help you kind of give yourself permission to live a little bit more like this. And none of this was seamless for me. I don't know how it was for you, but when I was growing up as a teenager, like I was saying, I felt really broken. I felt really lost. And, school didn't work for me. I just got by. I don't even know how, to be quite honest. I spent most of the time in the principal's office or kicked out in the hall or shoved into this little room they called the hole where the bad kids went. With no windows, 4 walls. I had to sit there.
You would have met me there.
Exactly. We probably all would have been there. I couldn't hold a job. I hated every job that I had because there was always these limitations for the expression that I could have or that I needed to have. And so for me, leadership became like my anchor, and learning to lead my life intuitively became the vehicle that allowed me to probably not end up a miserable, angry human being. And so that's what I teach now, is teaching people how to lead their lives first, personally, intuitively, and then bringing that into your career or business if you're an entrepreneur. So hopefully this will start to spark some inspiration for you to give yourself permission to do a little bit more of that as well.
I was just going to ask you, Jen, did you set out to achieve anything that you got on there? Because I never at all. I was the IT guy. I was quite happy as the IT guy.
Yeah. No, I would say every time something shifted for me, it was because I was suffering, right? So in my book, I talk about like why we suffer, and no, it was really an organic journey. It was like, I'm suffering right now. Something is not aligned for me, so something needs to shift. And then I would make that shift, and then I ended up doing New York teacher training. I ended up teaching leadership and coaching around leadership. So no, none of it was planned through the.
Yeah, same. Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned your childhood. Because I was very, very similar, and I was always told I couldn't write and I couldn't do this. And I'll always remember my careers meeting when I was 15 or 16. And of all the things to bring up, I said, I wanted to be a writer, and I was told, you're not very good writer. And I said, okay, what about I want to try hospital radio, I want to get into the DJ and the radio side of things, talk show. And it's like the old Steve Jobs quote, that you can't join up the dots looking forward, but now I look back, that 16-year-old kid is doing exactly this. That he set out to when he was told he couldn't, but I just manifested it for myself somehow.
Yeah. Well, and I think in school there's always that one teacher, that one class that sees you and really helps you flourish. And for me, that was my art class. And I remember once we had to do a painting, we had to put it in front and present it to everybody. And my teacher just looked at my painting and she was like, wow, you're really suffering. In front of the whole class, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. But my art class was my place to heal and really kind of find myself a little bit more.
I had a similar experience when I was in college. My professor told me I do everything so wrong that it's right. It sounded admired me when I did, but I did it so wrong.
Yeah, well, and again, what is right for us most often doesn't make sense to anybody else. And I think we were talking before about, with Sarah, the not fitting in. The reason why we don't fit in, or we feel we don't fit in, is because we're trying to fit into something external, outside of ourselves. Instead of like being at home in ourselves and feeling good with who we are, what we are, and how we function in the world, how we move through the world. And we're each like these very unique blends of cells and energy and magic, and so it doesn't make sense to try to fit in just anything else outside of ourselves.
I'll also say that the roles that you and I have created that we're sharing, they don't exist in the outside world really. You can't study to be, I want to be that type of person. It's like how unique blends of whatever skills we have and made it happen.
Absolutely. And when I was a yoga teacher and yoga therapist, and then when people started asking me for support in business, and then at that time, this was a long time ago, I felt like I had to put the yoga aside to move into the business stuff. Now I do it all. It's all on my website. I teach yoga, I teach meditation, I step into multi-million-dollar businesses and do work there in leadership. So it can all exist or coexist together, really.
Very similar to you in your stand-up comedy. And as well, you know, all those different skills that you might think, well, that's not part of what I offer. And Sarah with the band as well.
Yeah. And I would encourage you, anything that's coming up today that you're like, yeah, but, which is a limitation, just write it down. Just acknowledge it, put it pen to paper, and we're going to do some exercises after to help you kind of bypass our limitations, which we came up with in our exercise, so that you can open up that path a little bit more to doing whatever you want in whatever form. So obviously, when we think about limitations, it's very much related to conditioning, what we were taught, how we grew up. So we come back to Tyler's example. My dad conditioned him to believe that he could do whatever he wants. He has a full-time job. He works on a tree farm. He drives the tractor. He's like the top employee in the company. But we're all conditioned differently. And without shaming our parents or however, or by whoever we were conditioned, I think it's just really good to acknowledge it. And when we can just kind of go a little bit deeper below those layers of conditioning, we can then access our intuition, which is going to guide us to what makes sense for us. And there are a couple of fun concepts that Neil and I like to talk about. So I'll let Neil talk about the red card concept.
Yes. Anybody here heard of the red card concept?
Is that the target fixation?
Yeah. So if I was to ask everybody in this room, how many red cars have you seen on the way to this room today? You'd probably all say, none. I didn't look for them, I didn't see them. Whereas if I tell you now, by the end of this conference, I want you to tell me how many red cars you've seen, you will start seeing red cars everywhere, I guarantee it. And in 3,000 interviews on my podcast, people always say, you've talked to all these people, what's the thing you've learned? And I would say it's always be curious, embrace serendipity, all those opportunities that are around you. You'll see someone that might help you in your endeavour that you least expect, you'll collide into them. The universe will put them in your way, but you need to see those signs. And very similar to the red car concept, that's just like opportunities and people around you that'll be able to help you. So look out for those red cars. And I will be asking how many red cars you've seen at the end of tomorrow too.
Right, and it reminds me of Andy, your story of like talking about speaking in comedy, and even Sarah, you were talking about this yesterday as well. So I would use this exercise also when you think about the red car of saying, I want to start seeing opportunities where I can be a speaker and a comedian together. And then you're going to start seeing those things around you, right? On the flip side of that, confirmation bias is another concept that really hit home for me, because essentially confirmation bias, in my own words, I guess, if I explain it simply, is that we look for confirmation on what we believe. So if I believe that I'm a piece of
Garbage.
Yeah, I'm going to look for confirmation in the world that I'm a piece of garbage.
If you're told that all the time, though, I mean, they do it to women more than men, but it's still.
Yeah, and again, it's conditioning. So we got to remove those layers of conditioning so that, and start to recreate new intentions of what we want to believe, right? So really expanding our belief system. And then once you really start to embody and integrate that I am worthy, I am valuable, or whatever that is that you need to shift in your beliefs, you're going to start to then look for confirmation on that, right? But it's just very natural for us to be in the confirmation bias, looking for proof that we are all the things that are not very loving and helpful towards ourselves. So these are some kinds of limitations that can get in our way, but we can leverage these and use them to our benefit. So we're just going to do a quick exercise now before we go into like some more deeper exercises. But essentially, one of the things that I've come to understand lately is I imagine you guys have heard of the quantum field, right? So like there's this space, I like to imagine it above us, full of potential, right? It's like the stars. Imagine the stars up in the sky. And our job as humans is to pull that potential from the quantum field and bring it into human physical form through the channel of us, who we are. And we're all going to do that in our own unique way based on what our purpose is in this life and everything. So if your dog is outside and you want him to come inside, the logical thing to do is call your dog, right? And so you want to, for me, I found it important to really name and call on the thing that I want to manifest in my life or that I want to create or experience. So I'm just going to get you to close your eyes. Everybody, close your eyes. And try to think about the first thing that comes through. What is one thing that you'd like to do, experience, create, manifest that doesn't make much logical sense, but that feels good and exciting to you? Just let that download. And you can open your eyes and just like shout it out. Just say it. Pardon?
Hey, sourdough bread.
Sourdough bread.
Okay. Like shout it loud.
Passive income.
Passive income.
Build a cabin.
Build a cabin.
Get my private pilot's license.
Ooh, that sounds fun. Can you fly me?
Enough space and land to have horses in a greenhouse and the time to enjoy them.
Ooh, I just got chills. Okay.
Business call and CEO of Red.
There you go.
Yeah.
What else?
I want to speak on a stage that has so many cool ideas and scares me.
There you go. I just got full chills with that one too. Okay. Well, did anybody not get anything? No? Okay. So when we don't think about it too much, because thinking happens through our left brain, which we'll talk about in a second, just like kids, we just get to like download. Like just feel the thing. Even if kids don't care if they can do it or not. They're like, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to do all this crazy stuff. And then I personally believe that the universe supports us and then sends us little breadcrumbs. Once we name it and own it and we call it in, then these little breadcrumbs are going to start to be left in our life to invite us down that path if we're willing to see it. So I'm going to pass around these cards. They are quotes from my book, but it's kind of like a little oracle deck. I just want you to, we're going to pass it around so everybody can get one. I just want you to shuffle it and pull out a card. You can keep the card after, and hopefully it'll be a confirmation message on what you called today.
And while you're doing that, I'm just looking at 12 o'clock and I can see a red car.
Oh, there you go. And whether the card makes sense right now or doesn't make sense, just sit with it, be with it, and see what kind of breadcrumb it is that maybe wants to invite you into something. So while those are going around, let's talk a little bit about the brain. I like to talk about the brain in a very simple way. Having studied yoga therapy, obviously we go really deep in the understanding of the nervous system and the brain. And I get really excited when I talk about the brain. When I published my book, everybody was like, don't put the brain on your book. And I was like, yeah, I'm putting the brain on my book, because once you start to really understand how your internal system works and how you can use it to your advantage and leverage it, it can be really helpful. So essentially, in a nutshell, what Neil and I are talking about today is that when you're living most of your life from your left brain, you can see here the left brain is black and white, and here we have a lot of color. You're living in safety. It's repeated experience. You're just experiencing the same thing over and over again. So I like the quote by Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's when you're trying to do it from the left brain. It's when you're looking for guarantees. Okay, I'll take this leap, but I want to make sure that it works. Logic, it keeps you in your comfort zone and it keeps you in what you already know. And what Neil and I are inviting you into is playing more in the right brain. So this conference is a perfect example of that. We're going to be playing, right? And so right brain is about taking risks. It's about new experiences. So I had that coming up here. I had been traveling for the last 6 years back and forth from Canada and Mexico. 6 years ago, those first trips to Mexico were totally stretching me out of my comfort zone. But then it became comfortable, and coming here was like a whole new experience, so I could feel it internally stretching me. It moves you into growth. It's stepping into the unknown, right? So if you want to, I think Neil and I can both attest to that. If you want to experience anything incredible and exciting and new and expansive, it's stepping into the unknown, right? Because if you step into the known, you're just going to experience what you've already experienced. And it's really uncomfortable. But the discomfort fades away as you take more and more steps forward. So I just want to say something. I am not bashing the left brain. I say it all the time in my work. Our left brain is so important. It's what allows us to cross the street, look both ways, and not get hit by a car. It's what allows us to have a budget, to structure our business. We need it. But you just need to know when to use which side of your brain, depending on what you're wanting to experience, right? If you want to get out of debt, you might need a little bit more of your left brain to strategize, right? But you might also need some of your right brain to look at other possibilities you haven't seen. So we want to encourage you to play here a little bit more and get uncomfortable and step into new growth in your experience.
I'm curious, what lessons have you learned from seeing what other people do on getting that balance right? And because it's very tricky, isn't it? You know, because you need both sets of these, like you said. But it's very easy to go too far left or too far right. Is there any tips on the balance and getting that right?
Yeah. So I talk about actually. I talk about this a little bit in my teachings and in my books when I talk about, we have like different constitutions in Ayurveda. And I talk about that through the characters of Friends. Everybody's seen the show Friends, right? So going too far in the left brain would be like Ross when he gets really intense about what he believes and like no flexibility. And going too much in the right brain is like flaky Phoebe when she's just like all over the place and she doesn't even know what's going on in her life anymore. So we need that balance, obviously. What I've seen when the left brain is out of balance, people are trying to micromanage every single detail of their life and their experience. They're trying to control things to stay safe, and then they're frustrated because they keep hitting the same wall and getting stuck over and over and over again. Is that you or you?
No.
I've noticed that most micromanagers are short. Because I've had like, supervisors over 6 feet tall. This is men mostly, but I mean they just go to every little detail and it's inefficient. Whereas taller people will just do the thing and
That's the shortest comment.
So maybe you guys will get into it because I'm curious as someone who lives way over here in the right brain most of the time, and whose partner also lives way over here. Like we need a little more left brain in our lives. So I don't know if you're getting to like how do we access those different because we're both there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned that there's a lot of left-handers in this room, and I don't know if that's still a thing, but if you are left-hand dominant, that you tend to access right brain.
Yeah, it crosses exactly. So I would say it's easier to find balance